The first time someone called my scars beautiful, I almost cried. Because for most of my life, those scars only brought me shame. My name is Amelia Carter, and I spent 10 years hiding from mirrors, cameras, and people. I learned how to smile carefully, stand at certain angles, and wear clothes that covered every mark left across my shoulders and arms. People always stared anyway. Some looked with pity, others with discomfort. But the worst looks came from my own family, especially my younger sister, Rachel. Rachel had a way of turning every wound into entertainment. Growing up, she loved being the center of attention. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect smile. She collected admiration like oxygen. And standing beside her always made me feel invisible. After the accident, things became even worse. "Maybe long sleeves are safer," she once whispered during a family dinner while staring at my scars. "You're frightening children." Everyone laughed nervously, including my parents. That moment stayed with me for years. Because pain hurts differently when it comes from people who are supposed to protect you. The scars came from a naval disaster 10 years earlier. Back then, I worked as a civilian systems engineer aboard a military support vessel in the Pacific. I was only 24 years old, full of ambition and dreams. Then one terrible night changed everything. An explosion tore through part of the ship during a violent storm. Fire spread rapidly below deck while alarms screamed through the corridors. Thick smoke filled the air as sailors became trapped behind damaged security doors. People were panicking. Some were crying. Others were praying. And somehow, I ran toward the danger instead of away from it. To this day, I still don't fully understand why. Maybe instinct took over. Maybe fear disappeared. Or maybe I simply couldn't leave those men behind. Spent nearly an hour moving through burning corridors, helping trapped crew members escape before emergency teams regained control of the ship. By the end of that night, most of my upper body had been badly burned. The doctors told me I was lucky to survive. But surviving didn't feel lucky afterward. My fiancé left me during recovery. Friends slowly disappeared. And Rachel made sure every family gathering reminded me how damaged I looked. So eventually, I stopped talking about the past completely. Until everything changed one summer afternoon at a luxury marina event hosted by Rachel's wealthy fiancé. That day, I wore a sleeveless dress for the first time in years. I told myself I was finally ready to stop hiding. But the moment Rachel saw my scars, her smile changed. "Oh wow," she laughed loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "You actually decided to show them?" The humiliation hit me instantly. And what I didn't know that day was that a retired admiral standing only a few feet away had overheard every single word. Within minutes, Rachel's perfect world would begin collapsing around her. I tried pretending her words didn't affect me. But humiliation has a strange way of reopening old wounds. The marina sparkled with expensive lights reflecting across the water. Music played softly while guests laughed around us, completely unaware that my chest felt like it was collapsing. Rachel stepped closer, holding her champagne glass carefully. "You know," she continued with a fake smile, "some things are better left covered." Several people looked uncomfortable. But nobody defended me. Not my parents. Not Rachel's fiancé. Nobody. And, honestly, that hurt more than her cruelty. Because silence can betray you just as deeply as words. I grabbed my purse, ready to leave quietly. That had always been my survival method. Disappear before the pain becomes unbearable. But before I could walk away, a deep voice interrupted from behind us. "I strongly disagree." The crowd turned immediately. An older man in a formal Navy suit stepped forward slowly. Silver hair framed a face marked by years of discipline and leadership. Even before I fully recognized him, my heart began racing. Admiral Thomas Hale. The same admiral who commanded the fleet during the disaster years earlier. Rachel looked confused. "Excuse me?" The admiral ignored her completely. Instead, his eyes focused on me with unmistakable respect. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, "it's good to see you again." I felt frozen. Because suddenly, memories I spent years burying came rushing back all at once. The smoke. The fire. The screaming voices trapped behind steel doors. Rachel forced a nervous laugh. Wait, you know my sister? The Admiral's expression darkened slightly. Know her, he repeated carefully. Your sister saved an entire fleet from destruction. The marina fell silent. Every conversation stopped instantly. I could feel dozens of eyes staring at me in disbelief. The Admiral continued calmly. That explosion could have spread to nearby ammunition storage compartments. Hundreds of sailors were at risk that night. Rachel's smile disappeared completely. She manually reopened damaged emergency systems while parts of the ship were collapsing around her, he said firmly. Without her actions, many of us would not be alive today. My breathing became shaky, because hearing those words out loud after so many years felt unreal. For a long time, I convinced myself my scars only represented pain. But the Admiral saw something different. Sacrifice. Courage. Survival. Rachel looked stunned. You never told anyone that, she whispered toward me. I finally found my voice. Because I didn't need attention, I answered quietly. I just wanted peace. The Admiral nodded slowly. Real heroes rarely announce themselves, he said. That sentence shattered the atmosphere completely. Moments earlier, Rachel controlled the room with laughter and confidence. Now every guest looked at her differently. Some embarrassed. Some disappointed. Some disgusted. And for the first time in her life, Rachel had nowhere to hide. Rachel's fiancé stared at her silently. You told me Amelia was unstable after the accident, he said carefully. You never told me she saved lives. Rachel's voice trembled instantly. I was joking, she whispered weakly. Everyone jokes. But nobody laughed. Not one person. The same guests who smiled beside her moments earlier now avoided eye contact entirely. Because cruelty always looks different once truth enters the room. I stood there quietly, feeling years of shame slowly lifting from my shoulders. And strangely, I didn't want revenge anymore. I only wanted freedom. For years, Rachel convinced me my scars made me broken. But standing beside Admiral Hale that night, I realized those scars represented something powerful. Proof that I survived. Proof that fear didn't stop me from saving others. The Admiral gently turned toward the crowd. Most people spend their lives wondering if they would act bravely during disaster, he said calmly. Your sister already answered that question. Tears filled my eyes immediately. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel ugly. I felt worthy. My mother approached slowly, guilt written across her face. Amelia, she whispered, we should have defended you. I looked at her quietly before answering. Yes, I said softly. You should have. That truth hit harder than anger ever could. Because deep down, they all knew it was true. They saw my pain for years. They just chose comfort over courage. A few months later, Rachel's engagement quietly ended. Her fiancé later apologized to me personally for believing the cruel image she created of me. As for Rachel, people eventually began noticing the darkness hidden beneath her perfect personality. The admiration she depended on slowly faded once others witnessed how easily she humiliated someone who loved her. We barely speak now. Not because I hate her, but because healing sometimes requires distance. Later that year, Admiral Hale invited me to a naval ceremony honoring survivors and rescue workers. At first, I almost refused. Fear still lived inside me. But eventually, I said yes. And that night, for the first time in a decade, I wore a sleeveless silver gown. No jackets. No hiding. No shame. When I walked onto that stage, the audience stood and applauded. But the most important moment wasn't their applause. It was realizing I finally accepted myself. Because scars are not reminders of weakness. They're proof that someone survived something powerful enough to destroy them, and kept going anyway. Sometimes the people who mock your pain only do so because they cannot understand your strength. And sometimes justice arrives quietly, in the form of truth finally being seen.